So, thank you for coming, James. You were quite nervous, weren't you, tonight? So I've known James for a while. Funnily enough, a couple of years ago, I ran a startup school for a day, and James came along. I've got no idea why, because I don't think he learned anything. But and then, funnily enough, about 12 months ago, my daughter came home from school and told me about her new best friend, and I went to pick Jess up one day, and then James answered the door. And then so we figured out that our daughters were actually best friends at school, so we see each other a little bit then. But we're here to not talk about our daughters, although that could take all night.
No.
But about bootstrapping, so a subject close to my heart. So before we get into the Pro2col story, would you mind giving us a little bit of insight as to what you were doing before Pro2col started, if you can remember that far back?
Thanks. He knows my memory is not great either. So I just wanted to say, actually, before we go on to that I was very much press ganged into this by Marcus and Andrew. So I've been a visitor 3 or 4 times to the event, and very much got press ganged into this. So yeah, thank you, Marcus, giggling at the back there. So the start of my journey. Okay, so I came here in '93. Came to Bournemouth to university. It was, I guess, the first or second year that it was a university after being a college of higher education. I spent 4 years doing a business management, IT and finance degree. I guess I got some value out of that, considering where I've ended up, and decided upon finishing that degree that I didn't really want to go back to live in the Cotswolds with my mum and dad as much as I love my family. Being 21, 22 on the south coast, enjoying myself, earning a few pennies, and spending most of it in bars and nightclubs. It was a better proposition. So following that, I then went to work for a number of companies in and around the sort of Bournemouth area. I ended up finding myself, as many people do here, working in financial services, pretty close to here actually, with the company Abbey Life for a few years, and decided that financial services really wasn't for me. Working in a big organisation was something that I really didn't fit with, and I guess pretty much everybody in my family had been or were at that time self-employed, and it was definitely on the agenda that it was something that I wanted to do. So I ended up in '99 working for a tech company, and that was the start of the journey, I guess.
And so which company was that?
It was a company called Foresight. So they started out, I don't know all of the details because I wasn't there at the time, but they started out in the early 90s, developed software. They did exceptionally well, the guys who set the company up. And it was pre-2000 when there was money being thrown around at tech companies, prior to that .com boom and bust. And they were acquired in, I think, 96, 97 for quite a few millions at that time. And as a consequence of that business and working with the company that had acquired Foresight, a company called Wamnet, who latterly became Savis, there are I can think of maybe 10 tech companies that have spun off that company, that organisation. So it was quite a sort of innovative, dynamic sort of company. They'd grown to probably somewhere between 60 and 80 staff in Bournemouth, but it was still quite a sort of dynamic organisation.
And what was your job there? What was your role? What did you do?
So having not long left university, and then done a few menial jobs, and moved around a while, I ended up working there as a temp, and I suppose I didn't do a bad job, and they took me on, and I made my way into a technical support capacity, which I found quite interesting. Worked there for probably 6 months, and then it was clear that I wanted to do a little bit more than the opportunities that were sort of available to me within the technical support capacity. So I found myself moving into sales, much to I was surprised. It was never something that I really wanted to do, but it was an opportunity inside the company that meant more money, more opportunities, and so it was a route I took.
So this would have been late 90s?
So yeah, that was 99 into 2000.
Yeah, okay. So, and were you were you telephone sales? Were you field sales? Were you out in the car driving around? Were you... Because web demos didn't really exist then.
No, they didn't. No. The internet wasn't really much of a thing. No, I spent a lot of time. In fact, I ended up moving from sales into channel sales quite quickly. So I ended up traveling around the country doing 25, 30, 40,000 miles a year, going and seeing resellers of the software, training them up on how to use the software. I had a slightly different perspective on the solution because I worked in a technical capacity supporting customers. So I understood not just how the software worked, but why it worked and where it added value to their business. So me going out and training people in a reseller capacity, I had a bit more breadth of knowledge than most of the salespeople in the organisation.
And so when did you leave Whamnet?
So Whamnet were acquired. So any of you know much about American business? After, and it's probably going back to show our age here, but after 2000 and the dot-com bust era, the bubble burst, and finance going into internet-based organisations, it wasn't a sustainable industry or economy to some extent. So Whamnet went pretty much as close as you can get to Chapter 11, which is pretty much administration in the States, and they were acquired prior to going to Chapter 11 at the 11th hour by a company called Savis, and worked for them for a very short period of time. But they were only after a very small proportion of Whamnet's business at that time, which was primarily around managed networks and storage and hosting services. So the file transfer element of what the software did that we specialised in, they weren't really interested in, even though actually it was the most profitable part of the business.
So that's nice segue into Pro2col. So
Yeah.
is that where did you form the idea? Was the business sort of born out of the fact that Whamnet weren't going to do it and you thought it was an opportunity? How did that idea for Pro2col come about?
I was sacked.
Fair enough.
Well, no, technically I was made redundant. So they closed the Bournemouth office, and so Savis had an operation in Winner's Triangle near Reading, and anybody that wanted to transition from Whamnet at that time to the Savis business had the option. I also had an option to go to London, but really I wasn't ready. Didn't really want to leave the life that I had here. I was in my role, in my capacity, I was going up to London from a work perspective anyway, so I was getting that fix. I was enjoying that, but I didn't feel I really needed to live there. So this was sort of, I guess, 2003, early 2003. I'd worked myself to a position in a relatively short period of time, but the caveat there is that they were also shedding jobs. So whilst I was putting in a lot of time and effort and working hard, people were being asked to leave the business. So I was taking on more and more responsibility, which by the time they in effect closed the business in 2003, I was heading up both the sales and the channel business from here in Bournemouth. And I was fortunate enough, so the business was, it had two sides to it in effect. So the original business based in Bournemouth excuse me, had been a software startup. So they had developed a piece of software, these guys, before the initial foresight was acquired. They'd expected to sell a few pieces of software a year, not a huge number, and they ended up selling thousands of copies of it. And they were in effect at the forefront of the desktop publishing or digital publishing marketplace. So they were moving data around over, not even over the internet. The internet wasn't a thing. They were sending data over ISDN connections. So there was that software business that was still extremely profitable, but the business that the States, the companies in the States, or Whamnet, had brought over to the UK was, actually, we don't want to sell software that moves data over dial-up connections. We want to put leased lines into businesses, and they will have a Solaris box and Solaris box on each one of the connections, and you'll pay somewhere in the region of, I don't know, would have been as a minimum £25,000 a year to as a subscription service at that time. So it wasn't a particularly well received business model, it'd be fair to say, from those. So they bought a company that had an install base in the UK of about 14,000 businesses, and they wanted, the US business wanted to move it to a, in effect, a subscription business with rather expensive internet connections almost overnight, and there was a hell of a lot of resistance to that. So I found myself in a position where, fast forward 3 years, I had a reasonable amount of experience in the software side of the business. I knew both sides, but I was in a position where I could, in effect, leave with a database of contacts of up to 14,000 contacts to go and
that needed the business,
needed support.
So one of the things that we often talk about at these events is what's the driver for people starting the business? And I suppose my question for you is, if you hadn't have been made redundant, do you think you would have started Pro2col? Or did that give you a push that you otherwise may not have taken?
No, I wouldn't have started Pro2col, no. I would have started another business, but it probably wouldn't have been Pro2col. What it might have been, I'm not entirely sure.
So you definitely would. You think you would have definitely started another business? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was it about Pro2col? Was it just the fact that you knew the market? Was it that you had the database of potentially 14,000 customers that you could go to sell whatever it is you were going to sell? What was it? Those things? Was it something else?
No, it was that. So having wanted to work for myself and knowing that I was going to go on that journey at some point, it was one of those you don't look a gift horse in the mouth moments. I've got a database of contacts that was available to me, and these customers at this point were effectively being cut off. They weren't going to get any technical support for the software that they'd invested in. So I found myself in this unique position where a lot of the other people had either continued with the business and gone to, moved up to Winners Triangle, up to Reading area, or a number of the other people had just left the business, gone to do something else. So I was in a unique position that I could work with some of these companies to provide them support, and that's initially where it started. So
before we carry on, it might just be worth explaining to people. Some people may not be familiar with what a reseller is,
okay,
and a value-added reseller. So could you explain fundamentally what you do? Just the reselling bit of Pro2col, we can come back to the other bits later, but in terms of what a reseller model and how it works.
Sure. Okay. So for those that are not aware of the IT industry, a software company will want to sell their software as far and as wide as they possibly can, and there are two approaches to that. You can either take a direct approach to selling software, which fundamentally means that you need to have a larger workforce to be able to sell, support, provide all the operations around that, all the finance, and a number of other elements to supporting a large user base of customers. Or you go to market with an indirect channel where you work with IT resellers, IT companies, businesses that provide technical services to customers, primarily, but not always in their local area. So you'll have some national IT resellers, you'll have local IT resellers. There's loads in Bournemouth, but you've got almost a hierarchy of IT resellers. You've got those that are considered solution integrators, as you know, so the HPs and the EDS and Wipros and all sorts of really large multi-billion-dollar organisations, and that cascades down to some small organisations providing PC support here in Bournemouth. So the indirect approach for a software company in effect reduces cost, and what they do with the software that they are selling through these indirect channels is they give away some of the margin, and that can scale between only a few percent depending upon if it's a transactional model. They are just helping the deal to take place, all the work is taking place ahead of time, or if an IT reseller actually, and that's sort of where we fit in, has taken a technology on and is really running with it and putting a lot of work into creating a market in their local area, supporting, you're selling the software and supporting it for their own customer base, they get a more healthy margin.
Cool, excellent, thank you. So you decided to start Pro2col. How much effort did you actually have to get your first customer? Was it fairly straightforward? Was it still quite hard. Can you talk us through that process? And could you also talk us through at the same time, presumably what you had to do is you had to get reseller agreements with the software that you actually wanted to sell. So which sort of came first?
Well, I guess the starting point was that I acquired the company mobile that I'd had whilst I was working with Whamnet and Foresight. So all the contacts I built up over a 3-year period, if they needed to get hold of me.
Is that acquired as in bought, or acquired as in just took it with you?
No, I bought it, and I still have the same mobile number to this day, and I'm still in contact with some of those people too. So that's you're painting a great picture of me. Thanks, mate.
It's just a question.
Yeah. So I walked into accounts and stole it off the desk, stuck it in my back pocket.
Well, no, if the company was going
anyway, no. So they were quite happy. So a company being acquired or going into administration, they're very accommodating in supporting the staff that are leaving the business at that time. So it didn't take an awful lot of effort really to identify opportunities. I had a lot of data. I sent, I'm thinking back to the first web page that I created for the business. And in fact, I created the first logo. It was horrendous.
Is it the same one you still got?
No, okay. and that needs rebrand. Thanks, mate. I was a little slow catching up there. Cheers. Rebranding is on the agenda. So as a process for me at that point, I was working out of a back bedroom. So I'd met my now wife, and we had a flat together. I'd moved out of living with the gentleman over there with the lovely blue suit. And had a Mac, still using Macs now, from work, which I acquired, and that was me off and running. Really, I learned how to set up an email account, bought a domain name. It was an awful lot more challenging back in 2003 than it is now.
And what sort of did you go into it fairly confidently? Were you fearful? What was the general thoughts at the time? Can you remember?
Well, 2003 was a lovely summer. So I had been given a small redundancy package, which was nice, and that took a little bit of the pressure off. And I think it was August I was made redundant, which was a great month to be made redundant. And the summer hung around until October. And we had a nice flat overlooking the sea, and I was soaking up some sun. And occasionally I'd go into the back bedroom and send a few emails, and I got a few responses, and thought, oh, actually, I better put some effort in here. And as it happens, actually, there was a technical guy who I knew who was from Leeds, and in effect, I was the sales element of what was starting to become a thing, starting to become a business, and I needed. So I was getting inquiries through the email address and the very basic website that I'd set up, but I wasn't really putting a huge amount of effort into it until, I don't know, late September, early October of that year. And I realised actually some of the opportunities that I got, I didn't really want to drive to York, and I didn't want to drive to Lancaster or Leeds or where. I was maybe a little bit lazy in that respect, and I thought, well, I know somebody who I can call on to help me out to do the technical piece. I know that he knows the software because we contracted him whilst we were with Whamnet, and that really started the partnership that was that became Pro2col.
Okay, so would you have been able to deliver the technical support at that time, or would you sort of detach from it, or do you think you would have been able to go back and do it if you had to?
I could have done it if I needed to. The software wasn't particularly complicated, so yeah, I could have handled it.
And so, did your partner join as a? Did you think about how the company was formed? Was it just right? Let's go and do this. Was it quite formal? How did that come about?
No, it was very informal to start off with. So we both traded as sole traders during 2003 and into early 2004. We didn't have a formal arrangement, but during that sort of October, November, December and into early 2004, the phone started ringing a lot more. We started getting a lot more opportunities, training requirements, installs, migrations for the software. So it got to I guess in January of 2004, we thought, actually, you know what, we're probably onto something here. We should formalise the arrangement between ourselves. So we set up a limited company in February 2004.
And what made you think that? Was it just the fact that you were getting phone calls and winning contracts? I mean, how many contracts had you won by then? Can you remember, roughly? We're talking 10?
Maybe, 10, 15. Wouldn't have been a huge number, but no, would have been more than that. Because I remember walking out of Barclays Bank in Boscombe, of all places, with £14,000 in cash that I was taking out of our. In fact, I probably want to step back a bit. We traded as sole traders, then we set up a partnership, and it was the partnership account that I took 14 grand out, and we divvied it up between us evenly, and then we put a small amount of that back into the limited company to move forward. So it was at that sort of point where, well, actually we made a few quid, and we thought actually there could be some longevity around this.
And then so there were two of you.
Yeah.
15, 20 clients maybe.
Yeah.
What happened next? So presumably you're fundamentally a people-based business, aren't you? If you're supporting software,
yeah,
you need more people. Did you actually go through a process of plan? Was it just, right, we're going to get to 50 customers by this time in June? Was it just, I'm going to sit in my flat overlooking the sea and we'll see how often the phone rings? What sort of approach did you take?
Well, so sitting in a flat in a back room, working on your own is not a great place to be working, frankly. And at the same time, my wife was setting up her own company, and we were sat probably about as close as we are now, you and I. And she was looking into her computer in one corner, and I was in the other corner, tapping away and trying to make phone calls, trying to hustle and get business in. And when you're spending that much time in close proximity with your partner, things get a little stressed. So it wasn't long after that I moved the business out to a serviced office in Ferndown to get a bit of space to try and grow the business. We continued to pick up clients, and it wasn't really a case of recurring revenue. It was just odd jobs in effect. We do a professional services engagement here. We'd sell some software there. The business really started to pivot when a competitor of the company I used to work for, a German-based organisation, had produced a file transfer appliance, a piece of software, but also the server as well. So the original business I've been working was that we would sell a piece of software, and there would be a PCI, there'd be a card that went in the slot in the back of a Mac or a PC, and that would drive the software. And the company I'd been working for had been buying these PCI cards, they go in the computers, from this company in Germany, and this German company had also been developing their own software, and there'd been a bit of a to and fro and a bit of disagreements over the years, but anyway, they lasted a bit longer, and they created this physical appliance. It was called Stingray, which these two ladies over here will have heard of, and it was fundamentally it was a good product. Build quality was a little bit shabby, and we used to break occasionally, which created an opportunity for us. We started selling them and representing that German company, that German supplier in the UK, and because the build quality wasn't great, we were able to build a service business off the back of it. So we were finding that some of the hard disks, because it's spinning 24/7, the SSD disks weren't the thing then. Western Digital disks went pop every so often, or the power supply would go. So we'd hold stock of components that we'd have next day service, and we'd build up a support and maintenance revenue, and more of a sustainable business than just selling the odd day here or a piece of software there off the back of it. And that was probably the point at which we saw we'd get we had a more sustainable business, more longer term business.
So you went from supporting and and reselling one product to supporting and reselling two?
Yeah, well,
fundamentally.
Fundamentally, so the software that we started out with, it wasn't being developed any further. It was, we were helping customers to manage it into decline, really. The product was end of life. The company didn't exist any longer, but fundamentally it was something that the businesses needed to do their job. Whether it was a newspaper receiving adverts over the internet or over these dial-up connections.
So let's go, how did you get that deal to resell? I mean, you make it sound so easy that you just I just started reselling it, but you and I know there's a little bit more to that process, presumably. Was it as simple as a phone call? Was it a prolonged negotiation? How long did that take?
Well, I knew of the business. I had known of the business for some years, having sold their cards for some years. I knew of the owners of the business, not particularly well, and it would be fair to say that their sales weren't as good as they would have liked. They had a typical software distributor here in the UK selling the software for them, and I guess we were niche, we were focused, we were hungry as well at the time, and we wanted to sell lots of something to generate business, and this was a replacement technology in effect. This was something that the customers that already had in the database could move towards or move to replace the technology that was going end of life. So
did you manage to displace the existing distributor, or did you do like a code?
We did, yeah.
You managed to displace them?
We worked through them for a period of time, and then we took them out of the equation.
Okay, cool. And how did you do that?
We were probably doing about 85-90% of the business in the UK at that point in time. So we had a big proportion of the market, but we weren't getting sufficient margins for the work we were doing. So to extend that conversation about IT resellers, software companies or hardware companies don't always sell directly to resellers. They'll sell through a distributor, and the distributor will take a cut, and then they will sell it on to the reseller, and the reseller will take their cut, and then they'll sell it on to the end user, and the end user pays the full price. In this instance, this IT reseller, the IT distributor, they were an Apple distributor. They weren't, so there was some association with the fact that it was installed into design studios and marketing departments, but there was no real correlation to the fact that it was a technology as such that was moving data over the internet and moving data over dial-up connections. We understood the marketplace, we understood the technology, we could go and install it, deploy it, train people on it. It was perfect for us.
And so just to give people a bit of context now, how many products do you resell now, today?
I would say we focus probably around 4 or 5, but we can resell 10, 15, maybe 20 if we wanted to.
And these are all file transfer products?
Yeah.
So again, just to give people a bit of context, I think now's a good time. Could you just explain why you're different to Dropbox or another file transfer? Because most people know what file transfer is. I want to send you a photograph of something, I send it you, that's file transfer. But obviously there's a difference between doing it personally and doing it as a business. Could you just explain what those differences are briefly?
Sure, yeah. So businesses aren't silos. They don't operate without interacting with other businesses. Fundamentally a business will need customers, they will need suppliers, and there are interactions between businesses, and the likes of a technology like Dropbox or Box or WeTransfer or some of those other sort of file sync and share and collaboration technologies that exist are appropriate from a human-centric perspective, so people sharing data between one another. However, businesses, after they get to a certain size, you want to be basically eradicating a number of human processes. People make errors, it's just the nature of the beast. So if there are business processes that can be automated, and there is the need to move data between. Could be computers within a network, could be computers between trading partners and customers. So that movement of data that might facilitate a business transaction. We did some training in-house this week about the interaction between different technologies and where this technology sits. So a customer may submit an order to an organization. That order then doesn't want to just sit nowhere and do nothing. It needs to then find its way to the next point on its journey. So we talked about a typical example might be somebody submits an order or buys something online through some sort of e-commerce store. Well, that's not where that process ends. Fundamentally, what happens is the information from that online transaction makes its way into a CRM system. Salesforce is a well-known brand. It'll also make its way into an accounting system. It could be SAP, it could be Xero, it could be whichever type of accounting system. But also that same information makes its way to a logistics platform or warehouse management system, so that the thing that you've ordered is shipped. And so there's a lot of transfer of information that takes place behind the scenes in automated business processes. And whilst we talk about file transfer, and that's fundamentally what it is, actually it's about facilitating business transactions, business workflows, providing that automation to reduce manual errors and streamline operations. And it's the glue inside a business that makes a lot of business processes work.
And who are your typical customers?
They can be from any industry.
Do they have a typical size? Is it generally larger organisations?
Typically, yes. Yeah, so you'd be looking at businesses with turnover upwards of 10, 15 million, I'd say, up to multi-billions. So we've got customers in the utility space, financial services, banking, councils. We've got a lot of councils as customers, central government contracts as well. So when a business reaches a certain size, there are so many business processes that exist inside that business that will need to be automated. There's just no other way of where the business being operationally efficient enough to continue. So that's where these sorts of technologies fit in.
So you've got now, is it around 20 solutions that you can in fact use? Or is it 4 plus 15 or 15 total?
Well, so if we go back to the company I used to work for, go back to 2000, for example, the technology then, the amount of different ways, well, the internet wasn't really much of a thing anyway. So the amount of technologies, the amount of pieces of software that were available were pretty negligible anyway. And as technologies evolved and the requirements of a business, businesses and industry sectors have changed, then the ability to move data, the ways in which businesses move data is fragmented into lots of different types of technologies. Just so happens that we've been on all of that journey, so we're aware of, as an organisation, not just the technologies that account for maybe 80% of the use cases that, from an automation perspective, but we know those somewhat interesting and unique technologies that fit very, very small use cases.
So I suppose that's what I'm interested in is, if you started out with 1 or 2 and then you've ended up with 20, and there are others around, what was that process like from supporting the 2 piece of software? Did you consciously think, right, there are another 3 players in this field and I've got to go and support those guys? Were you dragged there by your customers? What was the balance between you predicting where you were going and then being dragged by your customers?
It was more being dragged. So I keep coming back to the fact that the internet was in its infancy. And we'd created some websites. In fact, some of our joint friends created a website for my business at the time, and it was based on Joomla. And so WordPress, not a thing, didn't exist at the time. And so you had a choice of, I think it was Magento or Joomla as platforms, and they're nowhere near as comprehensive as they are now. So we chose Joomla and had a site built for us. And it just so happens that we built it at the right time, it was built in the right way, and Google was still in its infancy, and it was absolutely crushing, the search terms that we're trying to compete for now, and we're struggling. Then we were, page one, top of page one, and we had inbound inquiries from people because they were finding either the technology name or the solution type. So we had inbound inquiries, and I guess
that was quite a niche website then, was it? Was it quite a dedicated, specific website?
Yeah, well, it was still the same domain, Pro2col.com, as we've got now. However, it was very niche in terms of focusing on file transfer technologies. And where we found ourselves is that we were talking about initially those two technologies that we had, and we were starting to get inquiries from businesses that wanted something else, something that neither of those technologies would deliver. So we started going out to market and looking for alternative technologies. And that's really how the portfolio started to grow.
But it's still related to file transfer, presumably.
All of it, yeah. And that's all we do. That's all the business focuses on.
And I suppose the reason for my questioning may sound strange, but one of the important things I think is that you've really focused on a niche, haven't you? And I speak to quite a lot of startups who think they can go and solve the world's problems from day one, and it's almost the exact opposite, is that you need to really focus down and get a niche, and it feels like you just went and go, right, this is our niche, we'll do file transfer, we'll stay there, we'll become experts at it, and let's see where we get to, sort of thing. In a positive way, it's such an important thing to. And how much do you think your specialisation has enabled you to grow the business in the way that you have? Do you think it's solely down to that, or is there something else there?
It's pretty much that, and we've tried a couple of times, had some almost aborted efforts to segue to do other things, and we've realised, staying specialist, staying niche, has really enabled us to grow as a business. And
so, what other things, that's led me nicely into, what other things did you try that didn't work?
So we were supplying a lot of solutions, file delivery solutions, into creative agencies, publishers and printers, that creative marketplace. So we looked at supplying creative workflows, in effect. So I'm not going to go into what they do, but in effect there were workflow technologies, and there were a lot of other people doing those technologies at the time. So we were a new, I guess in effect a newbie to that marketplace, and we found it very difficult to muscle our way in to get any traction. So we pulled back from that model and continued to focus on the niche technology.
So Matt, what drove the need to think about doing those things initially?
So that was about customer acquisition. So we had customers, and the intention at that time was to look at how we could start to sell more to the same customers. There's a lot been written over time about it's a lot easier to sell to customers that you've got than to keep trying to acquire new customers. So we took that to heart and tried to sell more to them, and we didn't do a very good job, it'd be fair to say. So we continued, and picking up on that niche point, we continued and have continued to stay niche throughout our journey. And really, if I'm honest, where we are with 16 odd staff as a company, you wouldn't think that a small organisation that's based down in Tuckton with a nondescript shop front that we would have some of the customers that we do, but we have both some fantastic direct customers, but what also benefits us is because we're niche and because we don't have a broad portfolio of products, we don't have that lateral ability to grow inside an organisation, in a customer. we find that the other resellers, the other IT resellers or system integrators will come to us for expertise and assistance with selling the technologies we specialize in into their customers. We're not a threat to them because we don't have anything else that we will sell. We'd rather take one of those resellers and sell our technology into 10 of their customers than take one of their customers and try and take the customer and try to own it. And so in effect the business model really is about longevity. It's about building those relationships with both the direct customers, but also those indirect channels that we've got available to us, but staying niche.
So how many customers do you have now, roughly, do you know?
I would say we've got about 400 currently under support and maintenance, give or take.
And do those generally have annualised contracts? Are they renewing every year?
Yes.
Excellent, that's good. Good to hear. And so is your focus now, and we'll come back to the growth story in a little bit, is your focus trying to understand how you can leverage that further revenue, or are you thinking about are you thinking about how the business is going to be changing over the next few years?
Yeah, as a business owner, you have to.
And can you share any thoughts on that in terms of what you're thinking about doing, or where you think it might go, or?
Yeah, so we've been spending some time talking about this in recent times and talking to some of our suppliers. So basically, organisations are needing to be able to integrate increasingly complex workflows or business processes. So when we started out on this journey, cloud-based applications weren't a thing. And so it was a case of automating the delivery of data between customer and supplier, and at an organization between different applications, between different servers within a company. So moving data around inside an organization to automate the processes and create efficiencies. But now, the applications we're deploying are hybrid, so they're both on-site, on-premise, and in the cloud. So maybe AWS or Azure as two common environments for implementation, or Google Cloud's creeping up on the rails. But there's a huge clamour within business to go and use SaaS-based applications, both from the point of view from an operational cost perspective, but the software suppliers themselves are trying to wean themselves off perpetual software license sales and move all of their customers into SaaS-based applications. Accounting applications are a very typical example of that. So Sage and some of those other applications are primarily focused on the cloud these days. So as companies, as our customers moving some of their business processes to the cloud, then there's a slightly different need for the movement of data. It's not just about moving it between the CRM system that's sitting over in one server to an accounts server that might be sitting in a different rack or something. Now the data is distributed, it's in different locations, and it can be anywhere in the world fundamentally. And workflows are becoming more complex in so much that there are lots of different applications that people are looking to stitch together. So if you take, a lot of organisations now will go for, let's look at Salesforce as a CRM, and they may have Zendesk as a support application. They might have an accounting application like Sage or Xero. They might have, or they might have an application that does it all. But largely, organisations out there are taking best-of-breed suppliers and starting to stitch them together. That was close.
It was close.
So the way in which they do that is by file transfer, but the next step on from that is by leveraging APIs. So it's a very different way of. I say it's a very different way. The bottom line is
it's changing the landscape subtly.
Yeah, it is. The outcome is the same.
Are you being affected by, or are you starting to see signs of the business being affected by things like Zapier?
Yeah, we use that internally. It's not great.
No, but in terms of what it's used for.
Absolutely. So the customers. So we profile the customers we're talking about. So the larger enterprises, mid-market, larger enterprises, they won't go down the Zapier route, but. I was talking to a guy here about chap over there about MuleSoft earlier, about those iPaaS integration platforms as a service. So the MuleSofts, the Dell Boomers, the Jitterbits of this world, they are the next phase, the next iteration on for us. So we've got a lot of customers where we're trying to we're trying to be their business process or business workflow provider or specialist, and there are very few consultancies and companies like ourselves focusing specifically on that. So we're getting quite a lot of interest from suppliers for us to sort of take that journey with them.
So I want to come back to the growth story a little bit. So from someone that started in sales, and then you start a business, and there were two of you, and you've now got 16 or so people. What are sort of some of the things that you've maybe enjoyed and not enjoyed so much about your journey? And do you have any sort of words of wisdom for people who are maybe just at the start of that journey?
Yes. So
that was such a bad closed question, wasn't it? I should have opened that. Sorry,
well, and I won't leave it as a
question.
Won't leave it as a closed answer. I mean, I've been coming here for three or four of these events, and I've spoken to a number of you in the room, and I think the single biggest thing, having started a few businesses over the years, the single biggest thing that I would say as a word of advice is that if you are going to start a business with somebody, that you are very careful about how you go down that route, that you are explicitly clear with one another exactly what it is that you want out of the business, exactly how much you're putting into the business, how long you want to be in the business. Everything needs to be very clearly documented, because as time goes by, if you don't have that very clear roadmap, if you will, mapped out, and that understanding with one another, then you'll find that the relationship that you have becomes fractious, and you'll find that maybe one isn't putting in as much effort or as much resource as another, and then it becomes arduous. So I've been down that path. It wasn't particularly pretty, and the business suffered big time as a consequence.
I think if you were the co-founder as well, or co-founder or one or more, you will always have fallouts and disagreements with your fellow founders. I mean, in Cliptool's days, two of our directors actually had a fight in a toilet in a pub in Waterloo, which is another story for another day. But anyway,
we didn't quite come to that. It was close.
But the point is, if you don't get this sort of stuff sorted out, what can start as a fairly minor disagreement can end up in fairly tortuous circumstances, can't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I remember a point in time, it will live with me to my dying days, at the point at which the straw broke the camel's back, and I'm not going to go into the details of it, but suffice to say, it was at that I know the point at which I knew the journey we were going on together with my co-founder at the time was no longer. And
so what was your thought process then?
I wanted out.
That was you that wanted out?
Yeah, well, it's a bit of reverse psychology, in effect. I would have always wanted to take the business forward, given that I'd been putting a bit more effort in. But yeah, it was causing a huge amount of stress at the time. I guess there's a number of things. You know, if you're not working to in the same, you're pulling in the same direction. If you're not got each other's back in effect, then you find that it just becomes a fractious, strained relationship. And yeah, I basically said, I want out. I want you to buy me out, and this is how much I want. To which his answer was, well, I want you to buy me out. And we were stuck in a bit of an impasse for a while. But yeah, we got to a stage where we'd agreed that I would buy him out and take over the responsibility for the business. And then a few days before we were completing the transaction, he increased his price, his shareholding, the value of his shareholding by 50%, which caused a reasonable amount of additional stress.
Excellent. That's a good one. I've not heard that. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a nice one. And so, what about employing people in terms of growing the team? Because I think that can be. Because one of the things about bootstrapping that you and I have both shared is that certainly when we were doing it, it became a real stress around whether you could actually pay the wages that month, or the next month, or the month. It's something that lives with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 30 days a month, until you get to that 29th or whatever it is at 12 o'clock, and you make the pay run, and then the next day it starts again. And I think a lot of venture, if you raise money and you raise enough money, you generally don't necessarily have to worry about that stuff until you're running out of burn. But from a bootstrapping perspective, you're literally on that from the day you start until the day you finish. And as the more people you get, it just gets worse. How did you find that sort of progress as you grew? Did you find it was a similar stress level? Did it get worse? Did it ease?
I think around about the same time that I parted company with my business partner, and I guess that was probably about 2012. I guess the business was struggling, and I guess it was struggling because the two founders of the business weren't, pulling in the same direction. We weren't seeing eye to eye. So there was a point in time when my relationship with my wife was somewhat strained because I wasn't paying myself. The staff were getting paid, but I took it upon myself not to take any money out of the business, and it's stressful both from a business perspective and from a personal perspective. But actually, in hindsight, looking back, it's created a huge amount of trust in the business, and some of the people who were with me at that time would walk over coals for me. Maybe. They
slightly warm coals.
Yeah. I was going to say glass, but no, maybe. Anyway, so they've been on the journey with me. They've seen the growth pains, even at those very early stages when there were only sort of 4 or 5 of us, that it was difficult. But to come back to your point about the challenges of growing a business. I've got to be honest, I was somewhat lucky. I'd employed some absolutely fantastic people, and you read all sorts of business texts around employing people who have different skill sets to you, that complement you, and I found 2, 3, 4 people that were around me at the time that, because of circumstance, because of the way and the culture of the business, the way we treated each other, they've stuck around and have been with me for 9, 10 years and have become sort of linchpins to the business. It's been challenging, the growth, and it was challenging at that stage, when the finances. Well, in fact, I was going to say the finances weren't there. The finances can be a bit rocky at any stage of the process, but having got some really good quality staff in, it made the process a lot easier, and actually after parting with a business partner, we went through a sustained period and we still are going through a period of growth. We're growing around about 30% year on year, and two of the girls who are in the room with us today joined us within the last year as the companies continue to grow. So.
And what's your thoughts on Bournemouth in terms of, have you had any downside, any upside of growing the business in Bournemouth?
Yes,
a lot. I keep doing these stupid questions.
So I went to see a customer once who shall remain nameless, and I was sat across the desk from this person, and they said. In fact, no, I wasn't sat across the desk. I was relatively early on in the process of the business, and they had one of these servers that had a propensity for the hard disk to go, or the power supply to go. So we got a call from this large media organisation, and we turned up the following day as is contractually required. and we're fixing it and fixed it and had everything signed off. And he said, "Oh, so where are you going back to?" I said, "Bournemouth." He said, "Why am I dealing with you? We don't deal with anybody outside the M25." I said, "Well, we've just done the job for you. What's the problem?" He said, "Well, we just don't do business with people." And they cancelled the contract after that. Now, as it happens, there was nobody else to provide them with a service, so I'm pretty certain they chose another technology. But yeah, there's some challenges. Challenges as a business owner to what people perceive the business to be like, because the business is not in London. And in fact, we have this superficial serviced office address in London, which I don't know why we still have it, but it is to give us a presence that we're inside the M25, I guess it. And I know there's loads of digital agencies that do much the same. They're working down here. They'll have a serviced office address, pay 50 quid a month for it, and for maybe a phone service and a forwarding of mail, but it gives that image of being a bigger business than you are.
We pretended to be in Silicon Valley for 3 years.
Did you?
$80 a month, that was.
Well, and it works. It's a bit of a farce, frankly, but it works. And in terms of employing people, well, there's two sides to that coin. I guess the way you would look at it from an employer's perspective is that you have a smaller pool of people to choose from employing in Bournemouth, but the flip side of that is that and this is only certainly my experience, is that the people that you do have here generally tend to stick with you longer. So if I was to have my business in London, I could be pretty certain that the turnover of staff that I had in London would be significantly higher than I do here. And frankly, I love living here. And a lot of the people that I employ love living here and move here for the quality of life. And I certainly won't change that.
Excellent. Right, does anybody have any open questions for James? Not closed questions. I'll answer all the stupid closed questions. Any questions for James?
I had very little costs, I've got to be honest. So I left that business with a computer. It was a pretty crap computer, I've got to be honest, but I left with a computer. I had an internet connection at home. I didn't need a huge amount more than that. I had my mobile phone, and I just got on the phone and spoke to people, and that revolutionary approach. And actually, I had God, how did I do it? I had a large database. I didn't use it all, but I had hundreds of people that I emailed and could email. And it's just occurred to me that I sent an email, and the database was seeded with a contact that was one of our resellers at the time, and the reseller had bought a load of old stock. He basically bought the right to sell this old legacy stock, and his details were in the database. So I emailed all of these people and said, we're here to support you. We're the only people in the country who can help you. Come and speak to me. I'll provide you with professional services training and stuff. And about a week later, I got a letter from a solicitor to my house to say cease and desist. Don't use that data. I'm like, that's all right. We'll carry on. So and in the end, actually, we ended up doing a lot of business with him. But to come back to your point, it wasn't particularly costly, and it's not costly to start businesses now. You can get up and running for next to nothing at all. You can clearly spend an awful lot of money in business, but you really, really don't. You can be up and running for tens, hundreds of pounds, building websites and having a presence and having a phone number. It's really all you need to start. No, it was pretty formulaic. It didn't do a huge amount outside of the scope of what the software did. And frankly, actually, I don't know how we would have extended the use of that software. Although it was with that in mind that we looked at taking on that additional workflow software that sort of sat behind it. So the file would be delivered from point 1 to point 2, and then the software would pick it up and do more stuff with it. But yeah, we never really cornered that market. Yeah, the software now is infinitely adaptable and continues to be so. The different types of technologies that organisations use, both in geographical regions, inside industries, inside a particular subset. For example, an accounting system, there's probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 accounting systems I could name that will have different ways in which they need to be integrated with, but they still form part, fundamental and probably one of the most critical parts of a business. They're not all going to be, a manual entity, a manual process inside an organisation. So people will want to be able to automate and integrate with them. So yeah, they're whilst the key objective for these pieces of software is to move a piece of data from point A to point B. Actually, the clever stuff is, what does it do after it's got it there? Does it need to transform the data into another format? Does it need to take a subset of the data and squirt it into a database or into another application? It's got quite complicated these days.
How much of what you do from the service side is light code or scripting as opposed to setup? What's the split?
So scripting, I guess, takes a couple of different forms in terms of this. So applications themselves have their own integration interfaces, if you will. So there's that sort of workflow functionality that you can point at this application. You can do X, Y, and Z with it.
That's still no code, though, isn't it? It's very much no code.
And then you could extend it a little bit with maybe some PowerShell off the back of it.
So how much like PowerShell stuff you do?
We do very little.
Very little.
Very little. There's very little you can't do inside these applications these days from an integration point of view.
So for me, I think the important thing here is that I often speak to people who want to start a business but not sure how they can do it from a technology perspective. Mm-hmm. And I think being a reseller or being a consultant on some form of technology is such a great way to do it. So even if you look at file transfer stuff, you look at Salesforce, the business that Salesforce generate in terms of just pure consultancy, even without code, is huge. Mm. Fresh books or whatever they're called now, Fresh Works, they're doing a whole business, and you can actually build a substantial business on the back of a no-code consulting environment if you so wish, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the other thing is it depends how long you want to stick at it. So we've been doing this for 20 years this year. I've been in the file transfer marketplace for 20 years this year, and what we've seen over this period of time is that, as with pretty much any company out there, staff come and go, and so we've developed and built up a real centre of knowledge around this industry, these types of technologies, and in some respects, particular products from particular software vendors. So just in the last week, the last 2 weeks, we've spent time with our top 2 suppliers, with their senior teams, strategizing about what they should be doing going forward. What's the industry looking like? Where are they missing out? What are they not doing that they should be doing? How do they catch up with the competition? Where's the future of this industry going? What do they need to be thinking about? And because we've been doing it for so long, the people that are coming into these organizations, they could be, I could think of one of our organizations where the founder, who recently sold for $220 million, I did relatively well. He pivoted 3 times in the time that we were working with him and got rid of the whole executive board. So we've ended up knowing a fair amount just through longevity. And actually, if you work with your suppliers and work with them, the personnel is going to change, and you're going to need to rebuild relationships again. But if you're persistent, then you can craft quite a lucrative business out of selling just a single type of technology.
Any other questions for James?
I wouldn't say I consciously decided. I don't think there were quite as many alternative funding options back in 2003, 2004. I could have gone to speak to a bank, but some of the the funding platforms, they just weren't. Wasn't an option. Would I have done it differently? No, actually, I don't think so. Having been there right from the start and having had to do everything, absolutely everything, gives you a perspective on running a business. It's really valuable when you're starting a business to go through the pain, to put 16, 17 hours in a day to get started. If you get it too easily, if it comes along too easily, then you don't really feel that you've earned it. But when you've put blood, sweat, and tears into it, and you understand the sales aspect of it, you understand the marketing aspect of it, you understand all the operational elements of it, you understand how bloody painful cash flow can be at times when you've got a supplier that takes 90 plus days to pay you a really, really, really crucial invoice that means you can't pay yourself. It's really valuable experience. So no, I wouldn't change any of that. It was painful at the time, but actually, it was useful. Good learning experience.
I think another added thing there is that one of the important things to recognise that 1 in 1,000 companies get funding. So the likelihood here is that if you start a business, you will be bootstrapping. You may not want to, but at 1 in 1,000, you're probably going to have to. So getting to know that business, this is probably the path that 999 people out of 1,000 will be taking. So it's a journey you have to do. So whether it's a choice or not, you can choose that 6 to 9 months chasing finance that you won't get, or you can go, right, I'm going to go and pick up the phone and get a customer, which is, to your point, is actually where a lot of people sort of fall down. They don't want to make that first phone call and go, right, I've got to ring and get a customer now. That's when it really starts to get tough. That's the bit that you did exceptionally well. And I think you made it sound a lot simpler than it was. Just go and get a customer. But even though you've got the database, I know people that sit with the database and will never call anybody.
Well, the other thing.
Sorry, go on.
I guess the other thing is to make sure that the finances stack up. There's no point picking up the phone to sell something where you're going to make £3.50. You've got to be selling something that has some value to someone, and that there's enough margin there. You've got to be. I guess you've got to work back from how much you want to earn and what your time is worth, and you don't want to be selling something that's not going to be financially viable going forward. You want to have a slight plan at least, anyway. Oh dear me. So my business partner, we were staying at one of his friends who lived in Eastleigh, kipping on a sofa, and we were trying to play around and be clever with words. It's been the bane of my life ever since. Pro2col, file transfer protocol, FTP, and having a 2 in the middle of the word has been, it's caused no end of headaches trying to explain to people how it's spelt on the phone or on applications, or oh god, it's been a nightmare. So it's a little unique. Managed to get the domain name for a relatively inexpensive amount of money at the time, but that was sort of the background to that one.
Can I give you a better story? I've got a slightly better story.
Okay.
I won't tell you my company name, but the first time, it'll make you sound really good. The first time we went to an exhibition in the States, an American came up to us and said, "Why is your company called Dick Tools?" And it was Click Tools, but the C and the L looked like a D. That was really not a good point in our startup life.
Well, that's an interesting one, Ryan. So actually, I at the point at which I was sort of reaching, that fractious point of the relationship with my business partner, we looked at merging with a company, one of our suppliers now, and a great company, and we've been working with them for a year or so, and they wanted our expertise, and it seemed like the right thing to do. It wasn't the right thing to do because the business was fundamentally a little bit screwed and broken, the relationships. I had an insight into working with VCs It's a place I don't want to go again. It wasn't fun, and for me, actually, business is about enjoying it, and it became extremely anal about the numbers, about where the revenue is coming from going forward, and it wasn't a particularly pleasant experience. I'm glad it didn't transpire, and it didn't transpire because the VCs didn't want to give away any of their equity. They wanted it to come out the founders. There wasn't so. In effect, the founders got aggrieved with the VC guys, and they pulled. They basically paid the VC guys off in the end, and they're now clear of any funding. In terms of growth and going forward, I think this last year has been we've seen considerable growth. Some of the challenges which you'll probably be aware of. One of the biggest challenges we've got at the moment is finding a home for the business. Where we are doesn't very easily accommodate the number of people that we've got.
It's a tight fit, isn't it?
It's snug, yeah.
So how much space do you need, just in case anybody, you need about, how much space do you need?
1,500 square foot would be fine, but it needs to be in the closest proximity of Tuckton as possible, because that's where I live. And that's probably hampering the search criteria. I'm going to see somewhere tomorrow in Christchurch, but it's too far away. So there's a couple of different ways of looking at that. There are lots of different applications that will integrate processes on the internet. There are some that are relatively focused on the SME market. Zapier are at that level. Their technology isn't anywhere near robust enough for mid-market enterprise organizations, therefore they're going to be looking at slightly different technologies, but largely in the same space, in the integration as a platform space. What you'll find is that they do 85% of the job, and then you need to then do the extra stitching in. So some of them have great integrations with applications, and it is as simple as point to click. But some of those business processes, it really isn't as simple as that. And certainly when you go to, you start looking at those larger organizations and the complexity of the workflows and the structure of the data, the files, the information that's passing between their applications and business processes, it's a slightly different ball game. And where I hope that we have some longevity in that space is that the very transient nature of IT staff within organizations. If we can create a center of knowledge around the API driven workflows, and we retain that knowledge internally, then we'll be seen as somebody to go to for expertise and assistance, which is fundamentally what we do with the other applications that we're specializing in now. So we're in effect taking the business model that we've got and we're repeating it, but from a slightly different technology area. I'm not sure we could. I mean, we're very much a people-centric business, and the value that we offer, yeah, we'll sell software or we'll sell subscription licenses for software, but fundamentally, it's about the ability for us to deliver value to a customer based upon our knowledge, and that's not something you can leverage platforms to amplify that a little bit, but the challenge that we have is that none of our customers really have the same processes, the same workflows in place yet. Largely they might do the same thing, but there's so many nuances in terms of how these businesses operate and the different technologies they integrate between, that there's always going to be some amendment, tweak, or some work that we'll need to do for them. So I'm not sure that we can amplify the business with technology set. I've been having a conversation in the last week with our operations manager about how we start to leverage some of these automation technologies that we've got. We've got some RPA stuff, some robotic process automation technology that we're taking to market. I would absolutely love for us to be able to use it within our own business, but finding a use case for it, because pretty much every single engagement that we have with a customer is bespoke and unique. it just doesn't work. And we're going into their businesses, we're looking to find processes that aren't bespoke, that aren't unique, that can be then automated, that there is some repetition, and that's fundamentally where the software applications that we specialise in fit. It depends where they are in their journey, but it may well be that they've already got a technology and they need some assistance with it, in which case we'll sell them some professional services engagement. If they haven't got something, then we'll go in from a consultancy perspective and we'll scope out their requirements and then provide them with a potential solution or number of solutions to choose from based upon the budget. There are various solutions that do the same thing. They've got some little tweaks and nuances between the different applications, but the price of the same application can vary wildly between suppliers, so it depends on the customer's budget and appetite for risk in terms of the type of application they want to put in place in their environment.
So I think we'll close off in a second, and Jez will be around for my questions. I just want to spend the last couple of minutes. I appreciate we're over time, sorry about that. I just want to talk, or give you an opportunity to talk for a few minutes about some environmental stuff, subject close to your heart. So I thought you might be able to get a few volunteers for some beach cleaning.
Yes.
Or something.
Thank you.
Come on, talk to us a few minutes about that.
I'm a country boy at heart. I grew up in the Cotswolds, and I've got a great affinity with the environment. Well, for me, it's a hugely important thing, and we see a lot of stuff on the TV at the moment with regards to political parties and their posturing around about how many trees they're going to plant or not plant. They won't end up planting any. So some of the things I get involved in, which is what you're wanting me to pitch, I organise beach cleans on behalf of Marine Conservation Society. So if you go onto Facebook, go to Beach Clean UK. That's a silly little Facebook page I've set up, but I get asked by Marine Conservation Society to organise beach cleans for the Great British Beach Clean, which is in September, or sometimes larger organisations that are trying to do the right thing from an environmental standpoint. So I organised a clean this summer for Savills, the estate agent, and they sent, I think it was 47 staff down. We went to Southbourne beaches and picked up, there was about 28 kilos of plastic and waste and stuff. So if anybody's interested in beach cleaning, after the storms we've had of a couple of weekends ago, there's an awful lot of crap on the beach that needs picking up.
We will put a link in the email that we send out for people.
Thanks. And the other thing I'm doing at the moment is carbon balancing my business, or carbon offsetting. So whilst there's no legal obligation for business owners, and fundamentally I think there should be, for big and small businesses to do the right thing around the environment. We know what our environmental impact is from the amount of energy that we use within the business, and within the next week or two we'll be funding both the forestation and protection of forests in a couple of international projects that the company we're working through has set up for us. But it's my aim next year to, as you know, buy some land and create some basically rewild forest some parts of the UK. So I'm going to put my money where my mouth is.
Excellent. And on that note, thank you, James. Great story. And thank you, everybody, for coming. Still maybe a couple of beers left, a bit of food. So please stay around, have a chat, and ask any more questions if you need to. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you in third week in January on the Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.